Admiral Lisa Bennett rolled her wheelchair across the metal floor of the bridge and stopped near the big window that showed space. She could see stars everywhere, but today something else was coming toward them. The enemy ships looked like dark shadows against the bright stars, and they were getting bigger every minute. Lisa had been in this wheelchair for 3 years. Now, since her shuttle crashed on Mars, before that she could walk and run and fight like any other soldier, but now her legs did not work at all. The doctors said she would never walk again, and most people thought her fighting days were over. The military leaders gave her this job meeting aliens because they thought it was safe and easy work for someone who could not fight anymore. Captain Jake Morrison stood next to her chair and looked worried as he watched the alien ships come closer. These ships were huge and looked like they were made to kill things. They had sharp edges and dark metal that seemed to eat the light from the stars. Lisa counted at least 300 ships in their group, and each one was bigger than anything humans had ever built. Amy Clark sat at the communications desk, and her fingers moved fast over the buttons. She was young, and this was her first time seeing real aliens, but she tried to stay calm like Lisa taught her. The other people on the bridge were nervous too, but they all trusted Lisa. Even though she was in a wheelchair, Lisa remembered when she first heard about these aliens called Zephyrians. They had been watching humans for a long time and did not like that people from Earth were building new homes on other planets. The aliens thought they owned all the space around here, even though they had never used it. Now they wanted to talk, and Lisa was supposed to make peace with them. The alien ships moved in perfect lines, like they were dancing together. Every ship was in exactly the right place, and they all moved at exactly the same speed. It was beautiful in a scary way, and Lisa knew these aliens were very different from humans. Humans were messy and made mistakes, but these aliens seemed to do everything perfectly. Jake looked down at Lisa and said quietly, so only she could hear, "The aliens are calling us now, Admiral. Should I tell them you are ready to talk?" Lisa nodded and straightened up in her chair. She had dealt with worse things than scary aliens, and she was not going to let them think humans were weak. Amy pressed some buttons, and suddenly the air in front of them started to glow. Slowly the light became a picture, and Lisa could see 3 alien creatures standing together. They were tall and looked like giant bugs with hard shells covering their bodies. Their eyes were like broken glass with many pieces that all moved together, and their mouths had sharp parts that clicked when they moved. The alien in the middle was bigger than the other 2, and had marks on his shell that probably meant he was important. When he spoke, his voice sounded like metal scraping against metal, and Lisa had to listen to a computer that changed his words into English. She could tell right away that this alien thought he was better than everyone else. The alien said his name was Ambassador Thektar, and he looked at Lisa for a long time before he started talking. His glass eyes moved up and down as he looked at her wheelchair, and his mouthpieces clicked in a way that sounded like laughing. Lisa did not like the way he was looking at her, but she kept her face calm and did not show that she was angry. So, "This is the great human military leader that we have heard about," said Thektar, and his voice was full of something that sounded like he was making fun of her. "A broken creature who cannot even stand up to face those who are better than her." The other aliens behind him made clicking sounds that must have been their way of laughing, and Lisa felt the people on her bridge get angry, but she held up her hand to keep them quiet. Lisa had heard words like this before from people who thought her wheelchair made her weak or useless. She had learned that getting angry only made things worse, and that staying calm was the best way to surprise people who thought they were smarter than her. She folded her hands in her lap and looked right at Thektar without blinking or looking away. Captain Morrison stepped forward, and his face was red with anger, but Lisa knew she had to handle this herself. These aliens had come here to test humans, and she was not going to let them think they had already won before the real talking even started. She had spent 3 years learning how to be strong in different ways, and now it was time to show these aliens what that meant. The bridge was very quiet except for the soft sounds of the computers working and the air moving through the vents. Outside the window, the alien ships waited in their perfect lines, and Lisa knew that everything that happened next would decide if humans got to keep their new homes or if they would have to give up everything they had worked for. She was ready to fight, but not the way these aliens expected. Vectar moved closer to whatever was making the picture that let them talk, and Lisa could see every detail of his bug-like face. His shell was dark green with lines of silver running through it, and his glass eyes reflected the lights from his ship. When he opened his mouth, she could see rows of sharp teeth behind the clicking parts, and she knew this alien was built for fighting and killing. Your species has moved into space that belongs to the Zephian hegemony, said Vectar, and his words came out slow and careful, like he was talking to a child who could not understand big ideas. We have claimed these star systems for over 200 years, and now you have built your little colonies there without asking permission. This cannot continue, and you will fix this problem right now. Lisa listened carefully, and noticed that Vectar was not really asking for anything. He was telling humans what they had to do, like he was the boss of everyone. She had read all the reports about these star systems and knew that no one had been using them when humans arrived. There were no alien cities or ships or any signs that anyone lived there before people from Earth showed up. We demand that you remove all human presence from 12-star systems. Immediately continued Vectar, and now his voice was getting louder and more angry. You will also pay us for the damage you have done by being where you should not be, and you will give us your big ships that carry people to new worlds. This is not something we will discuss or change. Captain Morrison could not stay quiet anymore, and he stepped forward with his hands in fists. Those systems were empty when we got there, and galactic law says that empty systems can be claimed by anyone who can use them properly. We followed all the rules, and we have every right to be there. The sound that came from Vectar was like metal being torn apart, and the other aliens behind him made the same noise. Lisa realized they were all laughing at Morrison, but not in a nice way. It was the kind of laughing that happened when someone thought another person was stupid or funny-looking. Silence, shouted Vectar, and his voice was so loud that the speakers on the bridge started to make crackling sounds. We do not waste our time talking to servants and underlings. We speak only to this broken representative of your pathetic species because she is the highest-ranking human here, even though she is clearly damaged and useless. Lisa felt something hot start to burn in her chest, but she kept her face calm and did not let the aliens see that their words hurt her. She had heard worse things from her own people when they thought she could not do her job anymore because of her wheelchair. The difference was that she cared what other humans thought, but she did not care at all what these bug aliens thought about her. Ambassador, she said, and her voice was steady and strong, even though inside she wanted to yell at him. Humanity has established lawful colonies in those systems according to all the rules that govern space travel and planet claiming. We are willing to discuss boundaries and work out any problems, but we will not abandon our people who have built homes and lives in those places. The clicking sound that came from all three aliens was even louder this time, and Lisa could see that they thought she had said something very funny. Vectar leaned forward, and his glass eyes seemed to get brighter as he looked at her sitting in her wheelchair. You misunderstand the situation, completely broken, one said Vectar, and now his voice was soft and dangerous like a snake getting ready to bite. This is not a negotiation or a discussion where both sides get to say what they want. This is us telling you what will happen, and you accepting it because you have no choice in the matter. He made a gesture with one of his long arms, and the picture changed to show Lisa the view outside where all the Zephyrian ships were waiting. There were so many of them that they blocked out some of the stars, and each one had weapons that could destroy a human ship with one shot. Lisa counted them quickly and realized that the aliens had brought enough firepower to destroy every human colony in this part of space. You have exactly 48 hours to begin removing your people from our territory, said Vectar, and his voice was back to being loud and commanding. If you do not start loading your colonists onto ships and leaving by then, we will show you why weak organic beings like humans should know their place under the rule of the hegemony. The picture disappeared, and suddenly the bridge was very quiet except for the sound of people breathing hard and computers beeping softly. Lisa looked out the window at the alien fleet and tried to count exactly how many ships they had brought. Jake stood next to her chair, and she could feel that he was angry and scared at the same time. Commander Kate Phillips, who was in charge of weapons and fighting, looked at her computer screen and then looked at Lisa with worry in her eyes. Admiral, our entire fleet here consists of only 47 ships, and their technology looks much more advanced than anything we have. If they attack us, we will not be able to fight them off or protect the colonies. Lisa nodded slowly and rolled her wheelchair over to the big computer screen that showed maps of all the star systems around them. She looked at where the human colonies were and where the alien ships were positioned and started to think about what options they had. Most people would look at these numbers and think humans had no chance, but Lisa had learned that sometimes the biggest advantage came from being underestimated. Amy turned around in her chair and looked at Lisa with questions in her eyes. Admiral, should I send a message to Earth Command and tell them what is happening here? They might be able to send more ships to help us fight. Lisa shook her head and kept looking at the screen. There was not enough time for help to arrive from Earth, and besides, she was starting to get an idea that might work better than just bringing more ships to fight. The aliens had made a mistake when they decided she was weak and useless because of her wheelchair, and now she needed to figure out how to use that mistake against them. Lisa spent the next day and a half working harder than she had worked since before her accident. She rolled her wheelchair from one part of the ship to another, talking to different people and looking at computer screens full of information about the alien ships. Every few hours she would call meetings with the captains of other human ships, and they would talk through their communication systems about what they were learning. The first thing Lisa wanted to know was exactly how the alien ships worked and what kind of weapons they had. She sent out small robot probes that could fly close to the Zephyrian fleet without being seen and take pictures and measurements. The information that came back was both good and bad news for the humans. Lieutenant Danny Walsh from the engineering section came to see Lisa with a big pile of papers covered in numbers and pictures. Admiral, we have been studying their ships for 20 hours now, and we found something very interesting about how they operate. Every single alien ship is controlled by one big computer brain that makes all the decisions about fighting and flying, and even things like air and water. Lisa looked at the pictures that showed the inside of alien ships, and she could see thick cables running from one central room to every other part of each vessel. This was very different from human ships, where people made most of the important decisions and computers just helped them do things faster and better. What does this mean for us if we have to fight them? Asked Lisa as she studied the drawings that Danny had made. She could see that the alien ships were much more powerful than human ships, but she was starting to understand that they might also have weaknesses that could be used against them. Well, said Danny, and he pointed to a picture that showed how all the alien ships were connected to each other with invisible signals. If we could somehow damage or confuse their main computer systems, they would lose the ability to coordinate their attacks. Each ship would have to fight alone instead of working together as one big group. Lisa nodded and made notes on a piece of paper that she kept in her lap. This was exactly the kind of information she needed to start planning a way to fight back. She had always been good at finding the weak spots in things that looked impossible to beat, and these aliens had just shown her their biggest weakness. Commander Phillips came to the bridge with more information about how the alien ships moved and fought. Admiral, their formation patterns are incredibly precise and mathematical. Every ship stays in exactly the right position relative to every other ship, and they move like they are all parts of one giant machine. It actually looks quite beautiful when you watch it, but there is something else you should know. Lisa turned her wheelchair to face Phillips and waited for her to continue. She could tell from the expression on the commander's face that this was important information that might help them survive the next day. The formations are completely rigid, said Phillips as she showed Lisa a computer simulation of how the alien fleet moved. They never break formation or change their patterns even when it would make sense to do so. It is like they are following a program that cannot be changed once it starts running. This was even better news than the information about their computer systems. Lisa had spent her whole military career learning that the most important thing in any fight was being able to change your plans when the situation changed. An enemy that could not adapt was an enemy that could be beaten even if they had better weapons and more ships. Lisa called a meeting with all the human ship captains, and she told them about something called the Lazarus Protocol. This was a fighting strategy that had been developed by human military scientists, but never tested in a real battle because it was considered too dangerous and unpredictable. Captain Morrison looked worried when Lisa explained what she wanted to do. Ma'am, that protocol was just an idea that some people wrote down on paper. We have never tried it with real ships and real weapons, and we do not know if it will actually work the way it is supposed to. Lisa smiled for the first time since the aliens had arrived, and she looked around at all the faces on her communication screen. Then it is time for us to find out if human creativity can beat alien perfection. The Zephyrians want to see what a broken human can do, so let us show them that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has already learned how to survive impossible situations. The next several hours were busy as every human ship started installing special equipment and running tests on systems that had never been used in combat before. Lisa supervised everything from her wheelchair, and she made sure that every captain understood exactly what they needed to do. When the fighting started, Amy worked at her communication station to make sure all the human ships could talk to each other instantly when the battle began. This was going to be very important because the Lazarus Protocol required every ship to work together in ways that would look random and chaotic to anyone watching. Jake stood next to Lisa and watched her work, and he could see that she was not scared anymore. Even though they were about to fight an enemy that was much stronger than they were. Admiral, do you really think this plan will work against so many alien ships? Lisa looked out the window at the Zephyrian fleet that was still waiting in its perfect formation, and she thought about all the times in her life when people had told her something was impossible. Learning to walk again after her accident was supposed to be impossible, but she had tried anyway. Learning to do her job from a wheelchair was supposed to be impossible, but she had figured out how to do it better than before. Jake, she said quietly, so only he could hear her. I have learned that impossible is just another word for something that no one has figured out how to do yet. Those aliens think they know everything about fighting because they have big ships and powerful weapons, but they have never fought humans before. They are about to learn that being broken does not mean being beaten. Exactly 48 hours after their first meeting, the Zephyrian fleet began to move forward in their perfect formation. Lisa watched from her wheelchair as hundreds of alien ships advanced like a giant wall of death coming toward the small human fleet. Each alien vessel was 3 times bigger than the largest human ship, and their weapons were already charging up with energy that made the space around them glow with dangerous light. The communication system activated, and Nektar's ugly face appeared on the screen again. His glass eyes looked even more cruel than before, and his mouth parts were clicking rapidly like he was excited about the violence that was about to happen. Lisa could see other aliens moving around behind him, and they all seemed happy that they were about to destroy the humans. Your time has ended, Broken One said. Nektar, and his voice was full of satisfaction and triumph. You have failed to remove your people from our territory, and now you will learn the price of defying the Zephyrian hegemony. Prepare to witness the complete destruction of your pathetic fleet, and then we will visit each of your colonies to finish what we started here. Lisa looked calmly at the alien ambassador, and she felt a strange peace settle over her mind. She had spent 3 years learning to accept things she could not change and to fight harder for things she could change and right. Now she knew exactly which category this situation fell into. Before you begin your attack, she said in a voice that was so calm it seemed to surprise Nektar, I want to thank you for teaching me something very important about your species. You have shown me exactly how you think and how you make decisions, and that information is going to be very useful in the next few minutes. Nektar's clicking sounds stopped, and his glass eyes focused on Lisa with what looked like confusion. What lesson could a broken creature like you possibly learn from your superiors? We have shown you nothing except that resistance to our will is futile and that your species is too weak to stand against us. Lisa smiled, and her voice carried across the communication channels to every human ship in the fleet. You taught me that you judge your enemies by how they look instead of how they think. You see my wheelchair and assume that I am weak and helpless, but you never bothered to learn what I have become because of this chair. All ships execute Lazarus Protocol and show these aliens what humans do when we refuse to stay down. The human fleet suddenly exploded into motion, but not the kind of motion that Vector expected to see. Instead of forming neat battle lines like every other species in the galaxy, the human ships scattered in what looked like complete chaos. Some ships dove down while others climbed up, and still others spun sideways in directions that made no sense according to normal space combat tactics. The Zephyrians fired their first massive volley of energy weapons, expecting to destroy most of the human fleet with their opening attack. Their computers had calculated exactly where each human ship would be, and their targeting systems were designed to hit enemies who fought in organized formations like civilized beings, but the human ships were not where the computers said they should be. Lisa had studied the alien targeting systems and learned that they worked by predicting where enemy ships would go based on logical movement patterns. The Lazarus Protocol threw logic out the window and replaced it with something that looked like madness but was actually carefully planned chaos. Human ships twisted and spun through space like leaves caught in a hurricane, and the alien weapons fire passed harmlessly through empty space where targets were supposed to be. Lisa watched the tactical display and saw that not a single human vessel had been hit, even though the aliens had fired enough energy to destroy a small moon. Impossible, shouted Vector as he watched his perfect battle plan fall apart in the first few seconds of combat. How can inferior beings evade our targeting systems? Your ships are too small and weak to survive our weapons, so how are you not already destroyed? Lisa moved her wheelchair closer to the communication screen so Vector could see her clearly. We are not inferior, Ambassador. We are adaptive, and there's a very big difference between those two things. You built your entire attack plan around the assumption that I was weak because I cannot walk, but I have spent 3 years learning to fight from this chair and learning to think in ways that standing people never have to consider. The second phase of the human attack began as ships that had seemed to be running away in panic suddenly changed direction and started targeting specific points on the alien vessels. But they were not aiming for the heavily armored sections that were designed to absorb weapon fire. Instead, they were hitting the small weak spots that Lieutenant Walsh had identified during their intelligence gathering. 1 by 1, Zephyrian ships began to lose power and coordination as their central computer systems were damaged or destroyed. The perfect formation that had been their greatest strength started to crumble as individual ships found themselves operating without the guidance of the fleet mind that had been controlling them. Lisa watched with satisfaction as chaos spread through the alien fleet like a disease. Ships that had been moving in perfect harmony suddenly began bumping into each other or firing at empty space because their targeting computers had stopped working properly. What had been a coordinated battle fleet became hundreds of individual vessels that did not know how to fight. Without their computers telling them what to do, the human ships continued their wild dance through space. But now Lisa could see the pattern that her captains were following. It looked like chaos to the aliens, but every movement was part of a larger plan that took advantage of human creativity and unpredictability. Her people were fighting like humans had always fought when they were outnumbered and outgunned by using their brains instead of just their weapons. Vector's face on the communication screen showed an expression that Lisa had never seen on an alien before. It took her a moment to realize that the great ambassador was experiencing something that his species probably did not have words for. He was afraid and confused and completely out of his depth for the first time in his life. This cannot be happening, screamed Vector as more of his ships lost power and started drifting helplessly through space. You're just broken humans with inferior technology. We are the Zephyrian hegemony, and we have conquered dozens of species across the galaxy. How can you possibly be winning this battle? The battle turned completely around as the human fleet pressed their advantage against the confused and damaged Zephyrian ships. Lisa watched from her wheelchair as alien vessels that had seemed invincible just minutes before now drifted through Space like broken toys with their lights flickering and their weapons silent. Captain Morrison stood beside her chair with his mouth open in amazement as he watched their smaller fleet systematically destroy the much larger alien force. Admiral, how did you know this would work? I have never seen anything like this in all my years of military service, and I would not have believed it was possible if I was not watching it happen right now. Lisa kept her eyes on the tactical display, where she could see every human ship and every alien vessel represented by colored dots. The pattern was becoming clear now that the chaos of the first few minutes had settled into a more organized kind of destruction. Her captains had learned to work together in ways that no computer could predict or defend against, because they made the same mistake that everyone makes when they look at me, she said quietly so only Morrison could hear her words. They saw the wheelchair and assumed it meant I was broken and useless and less capable than I was before my accident. But every challenge I have faced since that day taught me that real strength comes from refusing to accept that anything is truly impossible. The Zephyrian flagship was one of the last ships still fighting, but even it was having problems as human vessels darted around it like angry insects attacking a giant beast. Lisa could see that Thektar's perfect ship was losing power in several sections, and its weapons were no longer firing in coordinated patterns. Amy turned around from her communication station with excitement in her voice. Admiral, the alien commander, is trying to contact us again. Should I put him on the main screen so everyone can hear what he has to say? Lisa nodded and prepared herself for what she knew would be a very different conversation than their first meeting. The holographic display came to life and showed Thektar standing in what looked like a damaged command center with sparks flying from broken equipment behind him. The proud alien ambassador who had mocked her broken body just hours before now looked desperate and defeated. His glass eyes were dim and his mouth parts clicked erratically like he was having trouble controlling them. Lisa could see that this was probably the first time in his life that Thektar had ever lost a battle. "We surrender," he said, and his voice was barely louder than a whisper. "Please call off your attack and we will withdraw from this system immediately. We did not understand the true nature of human capabilities and we apologize for underestimating your tactical abilities." Lisa considered his words for a long moment, while she looked at the tactical display that showed dozens of dead alien ships floating in space. She thought about all the human colonists who would have died if these aliens had been allowed to carry out their threats, and she thought about what message this battle would send to other alien species who might be watching. "No," she said firmly, and her voice carried clearly across the communication channel. "You do not get to surrender after threatening to destroy innocent human colonies and murder families who were just trying to build new lives. But I will give you the same choice that you gave us when you first arrived here." She moved her wheelchair closer to the screen so Thektar could see her face clearly. "You will immediately withdraw all Zephyrian forces from the 12 star systems that you claimed belonged to you. You will pay reparations to humanity for the cost of defending against your unprovoked attack. And you will never threaten human space again, or we will finish what you started here today. But how is this possible?" stammered Thektar, and Lisa could see that he was still struggling to understand what had happened to his mighty fleet. "You were broken and damaged and sitting in that mobility device. We studied human military capabilities, and your technology is clearly inferior to ours. How did you defeat the greatest fleet the hegemony has ever assembled?" Lisa felt a smile spread across her face as she prepared to give the alien ambassador a lesson that he would never forget for the rest of his life. "I was never broken, ambassador. I was adapted, and there is a very important difference that you clearly do not understand. Humans do not break when things get difficult. We bend and we learn and we find new ways to overcome obstacles that would stop other species completely." She gestured toward the window where the remains of the Zephyrian fleet could be seen, scattered across space like the debris from a terrible accident. "You looked at someone in a wheelchair and thought you saw weakness and helplessness. What you actually saw was 3 years of learning to be stronger and more creative and more determined than I ever was when I could walk normally. The surviving Alien ships began to retreat as their commanders realized that continuing to fight would only result in more destruction. Lisa watched them go and felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with winning a battle and everything to do with proving that being different did not mean being inferior. As the human fleet regrouped and began rescue operations for any surviving aliens, Lisa rolled her wheelchair over to the observation deck where she could see the stars without any computer screens or tactical displays in the way. The battle was over and humanity had won, but more importantly, they had learned something valuable about their own capabilities. Jake came to find her a few hours later, when the immediate crisis was over and the reports were being written for Earth Command. Admiral, the other ship captains want to know how you figured out that the alien battle computers could be confused by random movement patterns. They are calling it the greatest tactical innovation in human military history. Lisa looked out at the stars and thought about all the times she had been told that her accident meant her career was over and that she would never be able to contribute anything meaningful to the defense of humanity. She thought about how wrong those people had been and how much stronger she had become because of her challenges rather than in spite of them. Tell them that sometimes the greatest victories come from turning your biggest weakness into your strongest weapon, she said as she watched a human rescue ship heading toward a damaged alien vessel to help survivors. The Zephyrians thought my wheelchair made me broken, but what it really did was teach me to think in ways that no one else could predict or counter. The aliens had mocked her broken body, thinking it made her less than whole and less dangerous than other human commanders. They never realized that sometimes being broken was just the first step toward becoming completely unbreakable in ways that no enemy could ever understand or defeat.